kind of springboarding off what you said, another big question that I have, not so much from the manga itself, but kind of from people's reactions to it so far. Kikuru's death. Kikura. Could you please pronounce Shinomaya
Kikoru.
Jr.'s name for me? Kikoru.
Kikoru.
Okay, now let's see if I can retain that. I'm bad with names.
That's
So,
all right. I plenty of
her
times
father.
I've butchered them. Yeah.
So far,
Isao.
everyone I've been listening to seems to be assuming that he's going to be a major antagonist, if not downright evil. That is not the vibe I'm getting from the manga. Not at
Yeah.
all.
I'm not getting that either.
And kind of the main reason is that the first real plot twist with Kikoru was her insane loyalty.
Yes.
Above and beyond just common battlefield loyalty. There was no reason for her to save Kafka.
Yep.
When he was about to be safely retracted from the field. In fact, some people could almost say that would have been too high-handed or impertinent. But her core motivation was that on no battlefield she steps on are there casualties.
Yes.
And at that time, she is 100% channeling her daddy's girl. And she's trying her darndest to emulate her father in every way. And so the implication is that that is something that she picked up from her father, that extreme loyalty.
So,
and all of his negative traits basically could be boiling down to that, his extreme loyalty and expecting of his daughter the same behavior that he himself would produce. And then during the discussion around the board table, there's not really enough time or scene to do much analysis, but it's all of the other guys around the board table who are having the sketchy discussion. He shuts them down and says, we'll discuss this later, let's take action. So he wasn't actually actively participating in the sketchier part of that conversation. So I'm thinking that he's not going to be the... okay, what's the word? There's a distinct trope.
Antagonist.
Yeah, antagonist was a specific kind of antagonist. The guy who's so caught up in believing that he's right that he'll do anything. Anyway, I can't remember the trope name, but I don't think he's that guy. So what are your thoughts on that?
So I think that maybe he could possibly be the necessary evil. Also though, those people in the room, we only see 3 of the people in the room because remember, he's not a division leader. He's just the director of the defense force. So my guess is when Mina gets to the base, we're going to meet the rest of the captains of the defense force. We're going to meet all the individual captains. And this is just a conversation prior to that. And like we were talking about before, like, are there going to be people that specialize in certain divisions? Like, one of the guys that's like, oh, use him as a biological weapon. He's wearing a lab coat. The other guy that's like, we should convert him into weaponry. He's wearing more of like military fatigues. So I think that there's going to be like a scientific division. Now, if there's a scientific division, we can honestly say that that's probably the tortoise for Genbu, because tortoises are equated with knowledge. So there's, you could have something like the dragon be equated to the army or whatever. But with going back to Kikoru and Isao, who's her father, she's always, the one thing that she's always looking to do is prove to her father that she's good. Now, when kids try to prove to their father that they're worth it, most of the time, the father isn't there. They're aloof. But in Japanese culture, you have that name still. So people are still going to look at you, and you still have to be good for that name. If you're a Shinomiya, you're expected to be as good as the Director General of the Force. So when I see the whole, is he going to have like a two-faced kind of thing and actually try to question what's going on with Kafka? Yes, I absolutely do think that, because he's a type of person, he's in that position, you have to, open up your eyes to every type of threat that there possibly is. If you look at his face looks like he's been torn apart to pieces, and he has scars all over him. So one of the things I also said was the kaiju, the incidents have only been around for what, about 3-4 decades. So these guys were 20 years old. They were just starting their lives when the kaiju began to attack.
What do you mean quite by that? The kaiju have been around for at least 500 years, as is stated.
Is that what they've been around for 500 years in the first chapter?
No, it's in the flashback scene when Hoshina's getting the snot beaten out of him and kaiju number 10 is mocking him.
Gotcha.
Yeah, or no. It was I'm getting my Hoshina moments mixed up. Anyway, it states that my family have been kaiju slayers since I forget which period, but it gave a reference period that was between the 13th and 15th century.
Gotcha.
1300 to 15. No, not 1300. Yeah, 1300 to 1500s.
Okay,
so that's what
the Edo
really
period.
established
That's
in
samurai.
my mind that the kaiju are a
generational threat.
Yes, and not just that they've been around for as long as anybody can remember. It's just that the kaiju things have been ramping up recently.
And that's why it was so nonchalant to have two orphans in Mina and Kafka. And that's why they were like, oh, when everything got destroyed, they were like, okay, everything got destroyed, everyone ended up dying. Oh man.
Yeah, this series really treats the kaiju as a natural disaster that have always been a part of this world.
Okay. All right.
And the only thing that stays new is that the kaiju have been getting bigger.
Yes.
And that the attacks have been ramping up, which kind of, I think one of your first videos that I saw was one where you talked about kaiju, the kaiju culture and hierarchy. And because I'd been thinking something along the same lines, but from my own perspective, it's when we see the kaiju, the first kaiju we interact with, and the first kind of horrible bit we get is when Kafka's sent in on intestine duty. And clearly the implication is that the kaiju intestines are full of incompletely digested human corpses.
Yeah.
Now, the kaiju have been getting bigger, and gigantism becomes a problem for creatures largely because they can't sustain those massive bodies. They need more and more food. And when food becomes scarce, when food becomes harder to get, the natural ecological response is to minimize size.
AKA the T-Rex of the chicken.
Or a faster example would be the marine iguanas.
Okay.
When there is a starvation period in the marine iguana's habitat, the bigger ones die off and the smaller ones thrive. When there's more food, they get bigger.
And that would make sense why the
that means that what's happening with the kaiju is unnatural. Either manipulated, because as the kaiju defense, there has been no major kaiju surviving since the Kaiju Defense Force was created. That's been pretty well established. The Kaiju Defense Force has been immensely successful, and Japan is the center for the kaiju attacks. Looking at it from an ecological perspective, what that means is that the main hunting ground for the kaiju, it has suddenly become resource scarce. There's not enough food anymore. Those kaiju should be getting smaller and weaker with every passing year, but they're not. They're getting bigger and more massive. Now, going off of your theory that there's an intelligence behind the kaiju culture on the other side of the rift, wherever they're coming from.
Yep.
My own personal theory is that as human defenses got better and better, all the kaiju know is because there's a certain, now this is just kind of almost pure theory on my part, just kind of spitballing, based on the fact that these kaiju have a ton of human mass inside of them, and they're not just digesting, because normally an animal will eat one meal, digest it, come back for more. But these kaiju are actively going out of the way to eat a ton of humans at once. Now, it might be because they're a nutrient carrier species. You know how salmon work. So you have the Kodiak bear, these giant animals that live on this tiny island in the far north.
Yes, terrifying
There would be no way that island could support them all. But the salmon spawn on the island, swim out into the Pacific Ocean, eat everything that they can find in the Pacific Ocean. They're fierce predators, and so they can eat pretty much anything that lives out there. Then they swim back, allowing the Kodiak bears to eat them after they spawn. And so you have the world's tallest bear growing in an ecosystem that should not be able to support it. And if the salmon run stops, then they would all die off.
Yeah.
So what if the kaiju feed on humans, and these smaller, less intelligent kaiju are the salmon that swim out into the human world, scatter throughout the Pacific, eat humans and whatever else they can find, and then return. Now, the only kind of real hole in my theory is that other than kaiju number 9, we haven't seen any kaiju returning from whence they came.
Yes. Well, we don't even know if he returned to whence he came. For all we know, he took another form and is still hiding amongst all of them.
And he has a lab somewhere in Greater Tokyo. But
exactly.
So that's the only completely unsupported part of this theory. But then that would mean that the success of the Kaiju Defense Force caused Kaiju number 9, Kaiju number 8, Kaiju number 10 to show up. Because if you have an intelligence operating back in the main ecosystem and suddenly their food source drops off dramatically, with very few kaiju coming back with any nutrients, then they'd want to know why. They'd send out a scientific expedition, but first they might try to alter their behavior. So you know the whole thing with the Ever Given?
No, I do not.
Okay. Anyway, giant ship got stuck in the Suez Canal, blocked global trading.
Yeah. I remember that now. Okay, yeah.
The reason why we have a ship as large as the Empire State Building is that a larger vessel can carry more stuff.
Okay.
And if fewer and fewer salmon kaiju are making it back to the main ecosystem with nutrients, it makes sense to send bigger and bigger kaiju if they can control that, because all it takes is one to make it back to bring in a ton of nutrients.
Yeah, and I also think that like they're doing the same thing. They're doing the same thing to the humans as the humans are doing to the kaiju. Because remember, during that first incident with Kaiju number 9, he says that he's going to take Reno and Furuhashi back. So
I think that was the second Kaiju number 9.
The second? Yeah, that was definitely the second. Okay, it's the one where they get shot.
Number 9 is definitely a scientist of some sort.
Oh yeah, because he's sitting there and he's the one that put the reproductive organs inside of all of the. He's the one that put all the he's the one that put all the reproductive organs inside of those Yoju that were attacking, and that's the one that Kafka discovered and was like, all these things have reproductive organs in them. When you kill them, they're gonna give birth and they're gonna come back again. So you have to kill the reproductive organs as well. So and then when he's bent over, he's like, oh man, they found my reproductive organs. So yeah, he's the guy that also, what he's able to do, what his aspect is able to do, is he's able to create, kaiju that can reproduce and they can come back to life, kind of like, the kaiju that they dealt with what was it the one that Mina dealt with that came back after, or no, it was he brought that one back to life during the first incident when he first appears during the exam. Kikoru kills that one and then it comes back again as a stronger one, and he's like, oh, you guys, you managed to kill it. Well, guess what? I'm going to kill you guys anyway. And then that's when Kafka transforms and yada, yada, yada. But I think, while that is definitely something, I think it's the kaiju have a hierarchy. They are sentient to a degree. And I like the theory of they're running out of sustenance and humans are their sustenance, or maybe even like the natural energy that the earth gives off is their sustenance kind of thing. So they need the humans all to die so they can take the environment. But I think that what they're doing is what we were going back to before, is that they're sending out those smaller kaiju that are spliced with human DNA to take human bodies and make those humans their conscious be taken over by kaiju. Like if you look at the first kaiju that we see, the one that goes inside of Kafka, it looks like a kaiju, but it has human hands. So it's definitely something, and it looks like I don't want to say it looks like it's been experimented on, but it looks like it's been kind of like, manipulated to a degree. So I would definitely say that Kaiju number 9 is a scientist, And what I referred to as the boss kaiju is more like a military general, because
Okay.
he was able to command the kaiju that were only known to work individually. The Dragoon kaiju, the Wyvern kaiju, I think they were called. They were only known to show up not in groups and only act individually. So there's these kaiju that are more knowledgeable. They've evolved to gain sentience that can control and manipulate the lower life form of kaiju, kind of like how we're able to teach monkeys sign language.
Okay, so let me throw a couple of smaller ideas that I've had at you. So the first one is kind of just a kind of a side note. Do you happen to remember the name of the one officer who's in their class? He's like the son of the guy who builds the suits.
Oh, that's oh, I see his face. Ah, dang. Oh, dang.
Anyway,
Yeah. It'll come to me.
I just found it oddly coincidental that he happens to be. I remember he said he came in for family reasons, reasons meaning business reasons.
Yes.
Do you think there's any chance that he is involved with what happened to Kafka and the janky testing is actually going on at his company? And he was
Uh,
there to observe.
I don't think that particularly. Um, I think he's just a tip, like he's supposed to represent the rich kid that got
Okay.
into the defense force. You know, each one of those officers that they introduce you to, um, they each have, you know, their own like thing that makes them, you know, a particular, you know, force within they makes them their own particular what's the word I'm looking for? They're what
Character
makes
type?
yeah, they're the one that makes like their particular archetype, because you only meet them in like I think it's like maybe like chapter 4 you meet all of them.
Yeah.
And
Okay, now that leads very
Izumo,
Izuma.
that's his name.
So
Haru.
your comment about meeting them in chapter 4 leads very well into my next question. So it's kind of a theory that I have that Kaiju number 9 has already has a mole in the third division. If not the third division, definitely in the defense force. So I don't, because it doesn't strike me as being a likely coincidence that he just so happens to attack the 1 year they have a full stock of the best rookies.
Yeah.
Because throughout the animal world, one of the biggest self-defense mechanism employed by animals with intelligence and hierarchy is to kill a competing dangerous animal before it becomes dangerous. Cheetah cubs especially are prone to this. It's why baby cheetahs look like honey badgers. Everything's trying to kill them because they know if they let them grow up, they're going to be a problem. But
Okay.
rats will do this for kittens. Any animal that's smart enough to have a hierarchy will do this. And Kaiju number 9 has been consistently shown to have, he doesn't understand human technology, but he understands human psychology very, very well. He immediately cottons on to the fact that Kaiju number 8 is behaving more like a human than a kaiju. And then, in order to escape, he immediately knows to threaten the lives of the two random officers that show up. He knows that will get him out of jail free.
Yeah.
And so he clearly has a good understanding of human psychology. And think about what would have happened if his initial plan had succeeded. And he'd taken out not only Shinomiya, but the biggest crop of recruits that there had been. And remember, this was the first time the Defense Force final test had ever actually been eliminating live kaiju. And that suggests to me that someone very high up is under the control of Kaiju number 9.
You know, I thought of it as they decided to bring in uh those the live fight, because they knew that they wanted to test, because this is like they said, like they have like 4 valedictorians and the offspring of the greatest kaiju slayer ever in Isao. So they did that purposefully, you know.
Okay, so why did Kaiju number 9 just happen to attack that year?
I think that was it's just like what don't get me wrong, we'll obviously see this in the future, but I think that one of the main reasons why he's attacking right now is because whatever is driving the kaiju to be this aggressive has pushed them to having to do it now, or they're making like what it starts with Kafka. Their main move is starting with him. So it would be said that they've done this to several other people. What's the law that like if one thing exists, everything exists kind of thing. So if this has happened to Kafka, we can guarantee that it's happened to other people. You know, we could say Kaiju number 9 was a normal person that a kaiju jumped into his body, and that goes back to what you said, where Kafka has that natural immunity towards being a kaiju, and that's why that's why he has such a like a control of just moving back and forth. Like I don't know if you're a Spider-Man comic fan at all, but the symbiotes turned out to be a sentient race of aliens, and they only lose their sentience when they find a perfect symbiotic host that represents the same thing that they represent. Now, when the Venom symbiote is on Eddie Brock, it causes that duality of man that, you know, he has the voice in his head that's always talking to him and stuff like that. Now, when Venom merges with Flash Thompson, who's the second Venom, that whole thing disappears. And he starts only turning back into Venom when he gets agitated. We haven't seen Kafka get agitated yet. We haven't seen him be at the throes of death where he might be more kaiju than man. That's what I think that might happen in the coming chapters. Is they're going to test Kafka's stress. They're going to give a stress test to him to see if you break him, will he revert to more of an animalistic kaiju form. Now, I'm trying to put 2 and 2 together from what you said, but I feel like you have a really good handle on it from that point of view, and I'm drawing a blank. Think you got me there.
Well, it struck me as odd that the 1 year they have all of, because again, it's the Chekhov's gun thing.
Yeah. If it's gonna,
The
if
1
it's
year
there, it's gotta be, yeah.
where Kafka can barely compete at all because everybody is so awesome. That's when Kaiju number 9 attacks, and the psychological blow of losing the heir of the main suit manufacturer, the heir of the main kaiju slayer, and all of this youth would have been a tremendous psychological blow for Japan. And then the fact that number 10 attacked when Mina was called away. That cannot be such
coincidence.
coincidences.
Yeah,
a
exactly. That's a lot of
at
coincidence.
perfectly opportune time.
That's the only things that's what the written story has, the power of coincidence. And the fact that Mina was away, we have to start taking into account of which characters that could be the most suspicious. Now you could say that, Izumo is suspicious because, he creates the suits, or you could say that maybe like Furuhashi. Furuhashi is just there when Kaiju number 9 attacks. So was he following the signal that Furuhashi was giving off, or is it Aoi, AOI?
Well, the thing is, the thing that I cottoned to was that in a world with completely equivalent technology to our own, if not slightly more advanced, they physically called her to a physical meeting. That suggested to me that the leak is actually higher than Division 3.
So that would mean that there's a possibility that Isao already knows about human hybrids,
or that one of those guys around the table was one.
Or yeah, we're gonna have like the thing going on here.
So one thing that keeps kind of coming back to me and striking me is the way the manga sets up the fact that Kaiju number 9 uses fungal type kaiju.
Yes.
Because in the real world, there are a few different parasites that can take over bodies and change behavior.
Yeah, like the one from The Last of Us.
The big one is fungus.
Yeah. Was it the cordyceps virus, right?
it's a different one for different. Every species has every insect species has a fungus that will climb into its head and change its behavior.
Oh, that is
It's either
awful.
fungus or a parasite of some sort.
Oh, damn.
And if that little kaiju, it seemed really ecstatic to see Kafka, as if this was a big pivotal moment.
Oh yeah, because you
Which,
see him, and it's like it has like the way that it's even drawn. He's like, "I
yeah.
found you." Like it has like those stress lines around
So
it and
that kind
everything.
of suggests to me that Kafka, while maybe not the only, is definitely a first. The first one that powerful, the first one that successful. And if there are other humans being controlled by kaiju, it might have been something more subtle, just some fungal spore that they breathed in and wrapped
Hmm.
around the base of their spine and started altering their behavior very subtly.
Well, then that's the whole thing of why they're taking Kafka to the maritime base, because they don't know whether or not it's a kaiju who's taken the memories of Kafka and has the personality of Kafka, or it is Kafka, you know. And I don't want to say that we are looking really. I think what we need to do is also take into account that they have used pretty much every single shonen trope is in this. It's
Yes, I really appreciate that. C.S. Lewis, he has a famous quote that basically goes, "Never worry about being original.
yeah, exactly.
Uh, uh, you tell a good story, tell the truth,
Yep.
and originality will come, but it will
Yep.
never come if you're worrying about it."
This is a story that's all original in itself, but it doesn't once ever deny what it is, and it is a shonen manga on Shonen Jump. So
Yes.
when like today during my video and during tomorrow's video, a little bit of a sneak peek, I talk about how there are so many manga that have done this person is now a monster, but we're going to take this monster and use it for our own good. So when that monster does that, when that miniature kaiju does the "I've found you" and takes him and turns him into a kaiju, we could have a situation where this kaiju doesn't really agree with what's going on in kaiju society. It's small, it's frail, it's looking for, it could be looking for somebody that has a good heart, that has the merit to sacrifice themselves. That's why it's reminiscent of the kaiju that was destroyed by Mina originally when she appears with the tiger and the rest of Division 3. I think that it was looking for somebody that would give its life for somebody. That would also draw us back to, is Reno a kaiju as well? Because
Funny, you're the first person other than myself who cottoned on to that there was a real visual connection between the little kaiju and the one that attacked them, because they both,
yeah,
and they both had hands.
yeah, they both had hands, they both had a humanoid face, those eyes. Granted, it's obvious that like, it's one of those things that like it could be that that little thing was the thing controlling the big thing. It was inside of it pulling its
Okay,
strings.
let me throw a little something out you on the same vein. On the first scene, when the human face kaiju pops out behind Reno,
Yeah.
there is I saw a distinct symmetry between Reno's face and the face of the thing behind him. And and given how good these artists are about controlling the meaning and the meaning behind everything in their art, I
Yeah.
just thought that was kind of very interesting.
Well, I completely agree, because if there's one thing that like one of the things that I've tried to do is, and it totally ruins things for me. Like when I'll be watching a movie and then halfway through I'll be like, oh great, that's the bad guy. This is the bad guy. I know for a fact they just did a matching shot. When like they'll talk about something and then the next thing you know they'll go to the next person. That next person, congratulations, that guy's the bad guy. Like they
Yeah.
just matched it up. So when they show the kaiju attacking Reno, it was it really didn't care whether or not Reno died. Its goal was to find somebody that was worthy enough to take this ability or this power of kaiju number 8, whatever it is. Because think of it like are you familiar with Devilman?
I watched the first episode. I really didn't get into it.
What was it? Was it Devilman Crybaby or Devilman?
The second, the crybaby one.
Okay. So Devilman itself is it's a somebody it finds it's the pure-hearted demon. So what it does is it searches out for that person that has the purest of hearts and takes them, and they become a champion of evil. So they're good guys that reside on the bad on the chaotic evil spectrum. So that's what I could possibly see this kaiju as, where it was, let's find somebody to become our champion that will, help us fight against, the people that are oppressing us, which brings me back to the hierarchy and how they're not a hive mind, and there are kaiju that step on other kaiju and control them. So I think that I really don't want to, because I love Reno. You heard me today during the video. Reno is probably one of my favorite characters. And if Reno turned out to be a kaiju, I think that it would break Kafka's heart, because the
Would it
the
though?
the relationship between them is so they've written it to be so powerful that
It is.
they don't just rely on each other. They are each other's driving force to keep moving forward. So Reno is very protective, and that's the suspicious part. What I would
Yeah.
say is the suspicious part is he's very, very protective of Kafka. Now, why would somebody who has he pushes it? He had like 14%, and why would he be the one to be the one to be so protective of Kafka? He's also, when Hoshina is talking about the people that have the prospects of becoming a captain, the only two people he speaks about are Kikoru and Reno. Everybody else is out of the picture at that point for even being considered to possibly be somebody on the level of him and Mina. And the only two people that he thinks of is Reno and Kikoru. So that could be another not a red herring, or rather it could be another little bit of an inkling that could tell us that maybe there's more to Reno than meets the eye. Do I want to throw myself into the side that thinks Reno could possibly be a snake in the grass? No, I think that I want to stay on I want to stay on the side that still thinks that Reno uh he gained his affection for Kafka because Kafka saved his life.
Well,
And
you're not proposing two opposite propositions there. There's call it a third option. Reno is connected with the kaiju somehow, but his relationship with Kafka is 100% genuine.
yeah, so he could be saying that he's maybe Reno was meant to die that day, and it was only supposed to give them an inkling as to who was supposed to become the kaiju or something like
Or
that. But
maybe Reno was there as sort of a proctor
to kind of make or a bodyguard,
maybe Reno was the judge because he was there. He was supposed to put his life
Uh-huh.
that Kafka was supposed to think his life was in danger, and he would judge how Kafka reacted.
And then when Kafka acted the way that he wanted to react, that's why Reno acted the way that he did, because when Kafka turns into a kaiju, he doesn't he freaks out, but he doesn't run away kind of thing.
Yeah, and okay, so here's something. There's that really fascinating image where Kaiju number 8's jumping out the hospital window.
Yeah.
And everybody's focused on Kaiju number 8 because it's an awesome shot against the moon and everything. But if you look down in the bottom right-hand corner, Reno is also jumping out of the hospital window. And in any other manga, I would just call it a physics error. A human does not leap out of a window from that height and land without injury, especially not a previously injured human. But this isn't any other manga. This is a manga that actually, when the kaiju winds up for a falcon punch, has 3 little tripod legs stick out of his leg to brace him for it. This is a manga that respects physics.
Yeah, you're right. Well, I'm looking at the panel right now, and yeah, he leaps, and then if you look at him, he has a glowing silhouette around him.
which is just kind of artistically necessary so the
Yeah,
character
because
disappear into the background. But look at the distance he's leaping.
yeah, he's jumping out of like maybe like the third story of a building.
And there is a ledge below him, but even if you land even remotely wrong,
You're gonna break
and
your
he was
ankles. Yeah.
distracted and freaked out and whatnot, that's going to damage your legs, but he's sprinting in the next panels. And again, if this were any other manga, it's a shonen manga. Physics don't apply to the male protagonist's body. But this
Exactly.
isn't any other manga.
Yeah, yeah, you're absolutely correct. The one thing that I've always kind of harped on is that Kaiju number 8 acknowledges shonen tropes, but also at the same time shows it doesn't tell.
Yeah.
So when you see Reno moving the way that he is, and like asking questions like, "Are you sure you really know who you are?" kind of things like that. Those are questions like, "Oh, are you you, or are you gonna tell me, you're gonna give me the call sign and I'm gonna be like, okay, it's time to move," kind of thing. So
Yeah.
he could be looking on to
And
wait.
then the second Yoju attacks just when they conveniently need a distraction. Just as he's trying to convince Kafka to dash down the alleyway and disappear.
Oh, like when he saves the little girl.
Yeah. That was identical to the first Yoju that had attacked them, and it very, very conveniently pops up at exactly the time where it would draw the approaching Defense Force officers away from them.
So in a way, it could have been almost, if we are in the vein of thinking Reno was a kaiju, or thinking he.
Or in communication with the kaiju faction that
Hmm.
objects to, if he sees himself as an ambassador. Maybe there's a group of humans who work with the group of kaiju who want to end the senseless slaughter. He doesn't necessarily have to be a kaiju, he might just be enhanced.
Yeah, yeah, but see that's the only thing is that gets me is like the sheer shock and awe on Reno.
Mm.
You know, that
Yep.
he's able to, he's acting very genuine, and kind of like the way that he's drawn to is to look scared and stressed out. So while I think that it's definitely in the same vein, because that kaiju that does appear, it looks like the initial kaiju that attacks in chapter 1 again. That humanoid having the weird teeth and bug eyes. It
Yeah.
happens again. So it makes me wonder if it's like, if that's like generic kaiju A, like that, like those constantly show up, like how like those wyvern kaiju are identical to one another. This area has this particular kaiju that attacks frequently, but at the
Yeah.
same time,
It's a
it.
So, here's another thought, kind of springboarding off what you said about how devastated Kafka would be if he finds out Reno's been lying to him. I don't think Kafka would be too emotionally upset for too long, as long as Reno's motivations were somewhat pure, because then be kind of a little hypocritical there.
Oh
But
yeah, oh yeah. Well, not to
um,
mention like
the
if
one
he was able to
thing
accept him.
I was really, really tense about chapter 33 going into it. Because when you have these shonen battle manga, I sort of have them organized into two groups in my head. I call them the wholesome ones and the yucky ones.
Okay.
And so, for instance, did you ever read The Gray Man?
I have watched a little bit of D Gray Man with
And
Alan Walker.
Titan is one of the yucky. Attack on Titan is one of the yucky ones in my brain. I mean, Attack on Titan drove me mad because it was so good I couldn't stop reading it.
Okay.
but it just left me so physically depressed afterwards. That was not
Yeah.
a happy manga.
Oh yeah, it's not. It's like
And Kaiju
Tokyo
number
Ghoul.
8, from the beginning I saw it had a potential to go either way. It was
Yes.
going to be either a wholesome manga or a depressing manga. And I sensed that the turning point where it kind of chose which path it was going to take was going to happen when he was captured. And chapter 33 was such a relief for me when the relationships are all finally made clear.
Yes.
And that that I'm still not 100% sure, but I'm reasonably sure that this is going to be one of the wholesome manga.
I completely agree. Um, when it comes to the duality of wholesome versus as you would say yucky, uh, I would say that Kaiju number 8 is definitely in the vein of a wholesome manga. Uh, I would say the duality of that is you have Chainsaw Man and Jujutsu Kaisen, which would also dwell on that aspect. Where I would say Jujutsu Kaisen would be more wholesome, while Chainsaw Man would be more quote unquote yucky. Because Chainsaw Man, when I always judge my stories by when when you know a character has fulfilled all of their purpose and all of their storytelling, like their plot, you can do one thing with them. You could say farewell to them, or you can kill them. Attack on Titan kills them. Chainsaw Man kills them. Naruto even kills them. So Kaiju number 8 is still waiting for its big cataclysmic death. It hasn't gotten its big death yet. And I have a feeling that it will come. It will be a character that has been frequent because remember, we were talking about Chekhov's gun. Hoshina has always said, take a look at everybody around you. Someone in this room is going to die. He always says that. And that's going to be a prevalent thing to eventually unfold in front of us, and we'll see it happen. Whether or not it'll be Hoshina, whether or not it'll even be Mina, because the whole thing, this whole story, has been him being like, will I be able to stand at your side? Will I ever get to join the defense force? Will I ever be strong enough to stand at Mina's side? Well, if Mina dies, then what's your true goal of being on the defense force? Because right now, the Kafka's sole reason for being in the defense force isn't saving people or being the best soldier. It's being with the girl that he fell in love with. So what if the girl that he fell in love with dies? And Mina doesn't really, and I don't want to say Mina doesn't really have a strong foothold in the story right now, but she's not. She's just a heavy hitter in the story. She's an anti-deterrent. So if you kill someone in the story, you want to kill somebody that has repercussions of that degree. Now, what Chapter 33 does is what I really enjoyed about it was how it was written from the point of view of Kafka. Like when Kafka says that he can't look at anybody in the eyes because he just can't bear to even look at them. The next panel, Naoya draws everybody without eyes. So you see everything from Kafka's point of view of everybody hates me. Nobody likes me anymore. Everyone thinks I'm a traitor. I betrayed Kikoru. I betrayed Reno. And then it takes Reno to stop and go, sir, you're going to come back to us. We know that you're going to come back to us. And the door slams in his face before he can even realize that they were standing there for a security escort, probably for Kafka's safety. They probably weren't there to make sure Kafka, didn't do anything or tried to kill everybody. They were there. Every single person at Division 3 was standing there to support Kafka Hibino. There wasn't anybody there that didn't think that he was going to save them. If he was a bad guy, he would have just left and let that bomb destroy all of the enemies. If that bomb went off, he wouldn't have had to worry about the Kaiju would not have to worry about arguably the two strongest officers in the entire defense force. Instead, Kafka goes out of his way to sacrifice his own identity as a human now to save everyone. So going back, when we have this strange duality of, is this manga going to go down the path of staying wholesome, or will it diverge and become brutal? I feel like you said, the path that it's already on is heading more towards wholesome, because it hasn't done things like Chainsaw Man did, where it kills somebody that you knew within the first 10 chapters of the manga, or Tokyo Ghoul, where it does the same thing. It or Attack on Titan, even, where on the first chapter of Attack on Titan you see that Eren's mom gets eaten. So those stories like to stay where they are and continue the route. My Hero Academia is a very, very, very wholesome manga, but it will kill somebody to make the character grow from that incident. You know, Japanese culture as it is, death really isn't a taboo. Death is a release in Japanese culture. What Japanese culture doesn't like is dismemberment. That's what it doesn't like. That's where it draws the line. Death, destruction, stuff like that, they're cool with that. But when it becomes dismemberment, maiming, torturing, they don't like that. So we'll see a lot less suffering in Kaiju number 8 compared to all of these other shonen that have existed. The same thing with Yu Yu Hakusho. Yu Yu Hakusho really started out with the death of Yusuke, but it let you know that death wasn't the end. So it was going to stay wholesome, but it was going to touch upon dark, edgy topics. That Kaiju number 8 we'll eventually get to, but right now it's still pretty young.
Yeah, so one more question. Interestingly enough, given how much the series built up the relationship between Kafka and Hoshina, we only really get one panel of a close-up of Hoshina's face and at the end there. So that the whole situation struck me as Hoshina just being crippled with guilt. How did it strike you?
So you're talking about when he's sitting in the room while Kafka's chained to the chair, right?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, other than the fact that he was obviously exhausted, has gotten no sleep in like 48 hours and just pushed himself to the limit. I mean, other than all the obvious physical, he's about to die.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's like the thing that really kind of got me is this is a slippery slope for Hoshina. Like I said, Hoshina even says it several times in his head that he was charmed by Kafka. He was entranced. He thought he made a friend. He has subordinates, and then he has Kafka. He looked at him like, because Kafka spoke to him with a lot of the people would say, keep that energy. Like Kafka spoke to him in that voice of, I'm gonna take your job. Like that was the type of energy that he came at Hoshina with. And the thing is, Hoshina probably never had that before. Everyone was probably terrified of them because this guy expertised in swordplay and he would ginsu you. So when you see him standing there with just those stressed out eyes and he's just staring at Kafka, you can just see him, like, you know, that feeling that you get where like people ask you what's wrong and like you don't know what to say what's wrong because what's wrong is you can't grab a thought in your head. Like you can't grasp onto anything. You just feel like you're falling and you're spiraling and you're just trying to grab onto a solid thought of what is going on. And that's what I feel Hoshina is going through, because for the most part, he thought of Kafka as his friend, but now, like Mina said, there isn't one person in Division 3 that doesn't think Kaiju number 8, that there's not one person in Division 3 that thinks Kafka Hibino is a threat. There's not one person.
That was also exactly the same thing I was kind of basing that question on. So I guess my real question was, At Hoshina's takeaway from this is his biggest problem going to be his own his sense of betrayal, or the fact that he was completely unable to protect Kafka?
I think it's going to be the latter. I think it's going to be that he's standing there in the maritime base with with Kafka, and he's formulating, now I can't leave this room because the minute I leave this room, someone might make the suggestion and someone might take my friend and turn him into a monster. And I don't want that to happen. That's what I get from that, because what I see, like I said it in my video, that the minute Kafka comes out, he's gonna be a training dummy for Hoshina. He's gonna be like, turn into the kaiju, let's do this. Let's bang out right now, me and you. I have to see my levels against you. And you are the strongest kaiju to have ever existed. So if I can stand up against you, I know that I can stand up against anything. So now that he knows that, because Hoshina's a smart guy. He's one of the most intuitive characters in this series. He knew that there was something. He knew that there was more than meets the eye upon meeting Kafka within the first 10 minutes of meeting the guy. And he loved to make fun of him. And if anyone knows how friendships work, if the more your friends make fun of you, the more they like you. So Kafka and him, they banter back and forth with one another. They stay up late more than everybody else. They're the first person in the building and they're the last person to leave the building at the end of the day. And they stay up and they work and they bust their hump day in and day out to try to one up one another. And even though he holds a title so much higher than him, Hoshina still looks at Kafka like he's an equal. And now that he knows Kafka has the power to stand up with him on that level, he sees him as his equal. He sees him as, I failed at protecting somebody, and they had to, quote unquote, reveal themselves as this monster. And in turn, I might have lost somebody that I considered a companion. That's how every single one of them thought. You see Kikoru drops to her knees. Reno starts sprinting. Mina doesn't know whether to raise her gun and arrest him or just let him go. And then Hoshina, in the last panel of chapter 32, just turns his head and sulks because he's like, what is going on? He can't even process what's going on. That's what I love about how Matsumoto is writing this manga, because he's able to humanize these characters so much to give us the same type of feelings that we would have if we felt like we were betrayed to a certain degree. And while this is a lie of omission, because it genuinely is a lie of omission, he didn't tell anybody who he was or what he was doing. So when they move past that, which will happen, there will be some weird kaiju division that Kafka will be a part of, or whether or not he'll go back to Division 3. That will be an absolute certainty, because they're not going to end this chapter with Kafka getting his head chopped off. So with that being said, I really do think that Hoshina is like, oh my God, I need to figure out how to save my friend, or even save my subordinate, because he's the guy who puts his neck out for him to begin with. The only reason why Kafka's in the defense force is because Hoshina, quote unquote, has at least 1% faith in him. So it's going to come down to, I feel like, Hoshina once again, and it'll also come down to Kikoru probably having to confront her father for the first time. He's a very aloof person. She's very wanting the acceptance of her father, because now, if you're familiar with shonen tropes, or the characters of females in anime like this, when they have pigtails, they're tsunderes, which means that they're overly aggressive, mean characters that have hearts of gold. So she's gonna go and talk to her dad, and that will absolutely happen. She's gonna be like, look, he's a good guy, and you can't let this happen. And like you said, he's going to be like, of course I'm not going to let this happen, but you need me to handle this right now, or else these people are going to take him, rip him apart, and turn him into machine guns. So that's where I think Isao is going to be he's going to look at him and be like, okay, you can exist, but you're going to be solely a kaiju slayer for the Defense Force. And yeah, that's pretty much my thoughts on it. I think Hoshina is not betrayed, but he feels like he let down Kafka, and he has to figure out now how to make sure that his subordinate doesn't turn into a test tube.
Oh man, I could keep talking for forever, but I just heard my dad's chainsaw stop, which means I got to get out and start stacking brush. So,
Okay.
all right, it was really great talking to you. Before we close, plug your channel and any projects you're working on, please.
Okay, so once again, I am Dan from Dan Exclaims. I'm going to be working on, in the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be working on some new anime / manga titles working down the line that are going to be coming out in the future. I'm not going to spoil too much. You'll have to be sure to come to the channel and see what's going to happen. But this week, we're going to be working on My Hero Academia Vigilantes, and this Wednesday, May 18th, we are going to be doing a review for Kaiju number 8, number 33. So I hope y'all come out and check it out. And Betty, thank you very much for having me.
And I'm Betty Adams from Betty Adams Overanalyzes, and my current project is the book Humans Are Weird, I Have the Data, a short story collection about the absurdity of human nature from the perspective of our little alien friends, available on Amazon. So you have a great night.
All right, thank you.
Bye-bye.
The book from author Betty Adams, Humans Are Weird, I Have the Data, is a humorous look at human behavior through the eyes of aliens. This book is arranged in separate reports or essays, documenting the experiences with humanity through the lens of the aliens who have to interact with them. This anthology of short stories and vignettes from alien points of view highlights some of humanity's quirks we can all relate to. Author Betty Adams captures how strange and interesting humans can really be. This is a fun collection of stories you will really get a kick out of. Humans Are Weird, I Have the Data, from author Betty Adams. Order your copy right now on Amazon.